Thank you very much, everyone. So everyone came back from the break. I think that that's a big success, so I'm going to tell my boss that everybody came back from the break to hear me talk. Thank you. So I have known Kairu now for a few years, and there's a lot to like about Kairu, but I like two things the most. Number one is he's extremely responsive and professional. Every time I send him an email, within 1 hour, I always get an email back. Doesn't matter what time. The second thing that I like about Kairu is he's very smart, in that he's going to have very cold beer at the end of a very hot day and a hot event. So very, yes. Yes. All right. So my goal in sharing a little bit about the revenue and the market for OCP is not to tell you that everybody is using it and that it's for every company. I'm here to share with you that most companies are starting to look at areas within open compute. So over the next few slides, be thinking of the types of companies that are looking and how they are using it. You will receive this presentation after the event, but earlier this year we had an analyst firm talk about the open compute market and do research around the amount of open compute business and revenue that is being generated. They interviewed current customers and current suppliers. They were able to determine the current revenue and forecasted revenue over the next 4 to 5 years for open compute. So I will share a few of the highlights, but there is a very detailed YouTube presentation that you can watch online. The first key result was that the current OCP revenue worldwide is at $1.3 billion last year. That does not include Facebook, it does not include Microsoft, it does not include Rackspace or Goldman Sachs. So those companies not included in these numbers. Over the next 4 or 5 years, Asia will continue to grow at over 100%, and Europe growing at 70%. Most of the Asia growth will be in North Asia, China, Japan, Korea. In the particular areas of growth, there will be servers, storage, networking, rack and power, and peripherals. The largest segment will be servers and networking. The highest growth area will be in networking and peripherals, so optics, optical transceivers. By vertical industries, as the market continues to grow, there are really two areas where most companies are looking right now. One is service providers. So those are hosting companies, web companies, or software as a service companies, and telcos. So telco companies around Europe are certainly looking the most at open compute on the networking side and on the central office. And I'll explain a bit more about the central office in a minute. The e-commerce companies and the web companies are looking at open compute, followed by retail and large enterprise. Public sector governments are also looking at open compute, but very slow to adopt. The key use cases for open compute. When I speak with an end customer, I ask them why are they doing open compute. The number one reason companies are looking at open compute is to run Hadoop. The second reason is they want to do open networking. And OpenStack and HPC are growing. But the top two, Hadoop and software-defined networking. So the business models that are being influenced by open compute. This is the central office re-architected as a data center. This is what telcos are moving toward deploying for 5G as they re-architect their data centers. So they have edge data centers, they have telephone exchanges, very small offices that maybe serve 20,000 households. Those are very small little areas where they may have one rack or a partial IT equipment. They are replacing that from proprietary hardware and moving toward an open hardware design. This is an example of what Telefonica is doing in Europe. So Telefonica has 800 central offices. They have moved 3 over to open compute. It has an open switch and a few open compute nodes. They're using open compute racks, they're using open compute hardware compute nodes, and they're using an open compute GPON device, which was contributed by AT&T. So this is an example of 2 telcos. AT&T wrote the specification, Celestica manufactures the product, AT&T is implementing it. We're going to see many, many more telcos take advantage of this type of design across Europe and Asia. That website, opencompute.org, lists a bill of materials. If you are going to do a central office re-architected as a data center, CORD recommends and has a bill of materials. Within that bill of materials is open compute hardware and the particular specifications that are needed. Another example of how a company is looking toward open compute is Nokia. There's a link to a webcast here. I encourage you to watch this webcast. It's around 40 minutes, but it talks about how Nokia is moving and how they're structuring their data centers from a central data center to an edge data center to a mobile edge data center, and how they're using open compute in all 3 areas. If you hear the word Nokia Airframe, that is their brand for open compute. So Airframe is the brand, everything underneath is open compute. And lastly, I'll talk about some enterprise companies that are adopting open compute. On the left is the London Internet Exchange. So the London Internet Exchange is deploying open networking. So they're running edge core switches with IP and Fusion software on top. And on the right is Booking.com. So Booking.com started thinking about open compute 2 years ago. They attended many events. They started to think about how they would do open compute. They now have 2 test racks within Booking.com looking at how to redo their entire architecture. So they're moving away from Dell and HP, and they're moving toward open hardware. They are another company that does everything in colo. They own no data center. So when they are using the co-location guidelines that Bill mentioned earlier, the spreadsheet, to talk to their colos about, can you handle open compute racks? Will you be able to unload them? Will you be able to deploy open compute racks? So this is a good example of how a large enterprise is looking at contributions that have been made by a group of companies like Schneider, taking that specification, downloading it, taking it to their facility, and then Booking.com is actually giving us feedback on what is good about the guidelines and what can be improved. So now they're contributing that information back to the foundation to make those guidelines better. The links to both of these are right here, so I encourage you to spend some time listening to those interviews. The last business model that I will share with you is around co-location. So as enterprises want to look at open compute, most enterprises use a co-location facility. As Bill mentioned, we have the guidelines now where colos can make sure that they can accept an open compute rack, they understand open compute rack, they can deploy it and service it. This co-location here, this is based in London. It's 20 minutes north of London. It's brand new. They are one of the pilot co-location facilities that is going through this particular program. They will then be branded as OCP ready, and they will be able to deploy and service open compute equipment. So I'm looking forward to having a Japanese co-location facility as part of this program later this year. So there are 3 trademarks and brands you will see when looking at open compute products. OCP accepted, OCP inspired, and the last one, OCP ready, is focused on the co-location. So that is what KO Data Center will get. They will get a stamp with OCP ready. But focusing on the first 2, Open Compute Accepted and Open Compute Inspired, the difference between those 2 products is very simple. Open Compute Accepted means that I can see the design files. I see the specification, and I can see the design files. Inspired means I can see the specification, I cannot see the design files. Both are okay. This is our OCP marketplace. About 5,000 people visit our website every month. America is the #1 visitor to our website. Anybody want to guess number 2? I don't have prizes, but Taiwan, you're right, yes, Taiwan number 2. Anyone who guessed number 3? China. Oh, very good. Let's see if you can get number 4. China, number 3. Number 4? India. Number 5. I'm not going to come up here and not mention Japan. Japan's number 5. 5 top countries, 4 in APAC. That's fantastic. What's not fantastic is we need more people deploying it. Okay? So, on this website, you're going to see the status. You can filter by status. You can also see the types of products that each one of our solution providers fulfill. What is a solution provider? A solution provider is our reseller program. You can be an Open Compute member. You can also pay an additional fee to be a reseller. A reseller may sell one component, they may just sell a switch, they may sell an optical connector, or they may sell an entire rack solution and services. They may even sell software. So do we have anybody from EdgeCore here? All right, nobody from EdgeCore. CTC, raise your hands. Higher. Make sure everybody knows you're here. All right. The longest SP that we've had in the community. They have been around the longest in open compute, along with Quanta. So it's been Quanta and CTC. You're very lucky in Japan. I say this every time I come here. You're very, very lucky to have the type of company like CTC that understands open compute and has been around open compute since 5 years. It's been amazing. So if you need somebody that knows more about open compute than me, talk to them. Penguin. Logan, raise your hand. All right, Penguin Computing, another very important solution provider based in North America, but with a Japanese location. QCT. All right, so these are the people that are going to market aggressively for open compute. So I'm going to filter on CTC, and you'll see one of the products that they can help you with is an EdgeCore switch. The way you navigate this is quite simple. I can see that the EdgeCore switch is an OCP accepted. That means I can actually see the design files. I can see the specification, I can see the design files, and I can see where I can buy the product. I can click through, find out more information, and there's CTC right there, and I can contact them. If I'm interested in seeing the specification for this, I can click on specs, and it will take me to an area where I can download the specification, etc. Okay? All right. The last thing I wanted to share is around the call to action. Join Open Compute as a community member or a corporate member. Make sure you use the branding and the logo. Participate in the projects. The best value that you can get out of Open Compute is to be actively involved. The companies that are getting the most revenue from Open Compute, the companies that are getting the most intellectual property and the most connections to larger companies are simply the ones that are more involved. If I open up more designs, if I attend more calls, I make more business contacts, I learn more, I get more out of Open Compute. I think everybody stayed awake. That's great. Thank you very much for the attention. You guys are always fantastic. Thank you all.